Okay, so today's talk is actually called the Saṅkhāruppatti Sutta. This is Majjhima Nikaya 120. And this is called the rebirth through aspirations. Now, for those of you who have been following this series, I think I mentioned that it's from the text called the Middle Length Discourses of the Buddha. That's translated by Nyanamoli and Bhikkhu Bodhi. Right, this is page 595. Now, the background of this sutta is basically talking about sankhara, or mental formations in rebirth. It basically describes how someone endowed with 5 good qualities may have the aspiration to be reborn in the human or heavenly worlds. But this mental aspiration must be developed and constantly cultivated. Okay? So today's talk is primarily about these 5 so-called 5 good qualities, right? Now, the concept of aspiration, you find that in Buddhism, when we talk about aspiration, sometimes we hear people talking about aspiration for enlightenment, making aspiration for enlightenment. In fact, in the last issue of Eastern Horizon, the magazine that I think Sean mentioned, which I helped to edit, actually I had an article there, which is actually based on an interview with Venerable Agachita, Venerable Mingwei, and Geshe Dadu. So we got 3 different Buddhist traditions and what they have to say about aspiration for enlightenment. So if you're interested to read more about these aspects of making aspirations, you can access that article, which is found in the I think it's a May issue of Eastern Horizon. Okay. Now today, the concept of aspiration is not so much about aspiring for enlightenment, but aspiring to be reborn in happy states. Okay. Even though ultimately in this discourse itself, Buddha did talk about the highest aspiration is of course an aspiration to end all rebirth. But primarily this sutta itself talks about the 5 qualities that we would need if we want to make an aspiration for higher rebirth. Okay? Now, this concept is not only found in this sutta, but if you read the Saṅkhāruppatti Sutta, which is Sutta 33, I think in the Digha Nikaya, it also talks about aspiration for favorable rebirth. How can it be effective? Now, then, if you follow this discourse, then the Buddha introduces the term sankhara. In fact, the title of this talk, called Saṅkhāruppatti Sutta, Saṅkhāruppatti, it's been translated as a reappearance or rebirth through aspiration. So that sankhara. Now, if you are familiar with this word sankhara, you find that it appears, for example, in the 12 links in the dependent origination. Where the first link talks about ignorance, conditions, volitional activities. You may be familiar with the Pali word avijja, pacaya, sankhara. So which means it's ignorance that conditions sankhara. So what is sankhara? All right. And in the 12 link dependent origination, Buddha talks about sankhara, pacaya, vijnana. That means from sankhara, it conditions rebirth consciousness, which is vijnana. And so on. So you have the 12 spokes in the independent origination. But for today's talk, we shall look at sankhara in terms of it being karmically active volitions responsible for generating rebirth and therefore sustaining our existence in samsara. Now, you would remember by now that we talk about karma being generated through 3 doors, through the body door, through the verbal door, and through the mental doors. And likewise, you would have learned by now that karma is also got 3 types. You have got the meritorious type of karma, the one like good actions, skillful actions, wholesome actions that results in wholesome and good results. The demeritorious actions, or the unwholesome, unskillful actions, which results in unpleasant states, and likewise what is called the imperturbable, the volitions present in the 4 formless meditations. Now, in this discourse itself, the Buddha talks about how favorable rebirth takes place when you make an aspiration and followed by practicing 5 very important qualities. So while aspiration is important, yet by itself, aspiration is not good enough. You need to have 5 qualities. So the subject of today's talk, we shall see what these 5 qualities are all about. And because of when you have both aspiration and 5 factors, you have got good rebirth. Now, before we look into these 5 factors, if you have a copy of this text, then you'll find that the Buddha talks about the realms of existence that one could be reborn in. In the traditional Buddhist cosmology, it talks about 31 planes of existence. Okay, for today's talk, we will not have time to go into each of the 31 planes of existence. But if you are interested, there's a very good book. It's actually written by, well, it's a recording of cassette recordings of the late Bhante Suvarno. Some of you know him, the Hokkien-speaking monk from Penang, who has passed away. Well, he also speaks in English. So he wrote a book called The 31 Planes of Existence. It's actually a collection of Bhante Suvarno's cassette recordings. So you can make reference to that book. So very briefly, I just want to mention that this 31 planes of existence, which is enumerated in this sutta itself, it talks about beings in samsara. We can be reborn in any of these 31 planes of existence. But if you want to have a favorable rebirth, then you're primarily talking about rebirth in, for example, in the human realm, in the 6 heavenly realms, in the form realms, and in the formless realms. And in the 31 planes of existence, there are also what is called the 4 woeful states, or 4 states of suffering. In other words, the realm of the animals, the realm of hell beings, the realm of hungry ghosts, and the realm of asuras, which have been translated as demons or aitans. So these are the 4 realms that we do not aspire to take rebirth, but we aspire to take rebirth in the sensual realms, which is the human realm and the 6 heavenly realms, as well as the form realms and the formless realms. Okay. Now, in the next discourse that we're going to talk about in the Salayaka Sutta, the Buddha also talks about the 31 planes of existence, but it explains in that discourse about the importance of practicing the 10 wholesome actions and having right views at the point of death to be reborn in these happy states. All right. So of particular interest, I think, to lay Buddhists, all right, would be rebirth in the human realm and then reborn in the 6 heavenly realms. Now, the 6 heavenly realms, they also have got names. For example, the lowest of the 6 heavenly realms is called the Chatu Maharajika Deva, or the realms of the 4 guardian beings. Now, it is also in these realms that you find the existence of other beings mentioned in the scriptures, like the Gandhabas, the silential musicians, the yakas, the nagas, as well as the dwarf-like beings called the kumbandas. So they're all found in this lower realms called the Chatu Maharajika Devas, right? It's a heavenly realm, sense realm. Then higher than this realm is what is called the Tavatimsa heavens, the realm of the 33 gods. All right, it is in this realm that you have Sakka, the god of the king of the gods, which the Chinese worship as the king of heaven, right? The Tavatimsa heaven. And above Tavatimsa heaven, you have another realm of gods called the Yama gods. Not much is mentioned about the Yama gods in the text, but it is said that they live in the air and they are free of all defilements. And then even above, higher than the Yama gods, you have what is called the Tusita heaven. Now, the Tusita heaven, again, is a popular name that you find frequently mentioned in the scriptures. It is said that the bodhisattvas, prior to the full enlightenment, they take rebirth in Tusita heaven. So Buddhists believe that the next Buddha, that's Buddha Metteyya, is now residing in Tusita heaven. So that's the 4th of the 6 heavenly realms. So you got two more. Then you got realm number 5, which is called the Nimanarati, which is a realm where the gods, they delight in the sense objects of their own creation. So whatever they like, they just create in their minds, and as a result of that creation, they are able to enjoy the sense pleasures of their own creation. So that's called the Nimanarati Devaloka. And finally, the 6th realm, the sixth of the highest realm, it likewise has a name. It's called the Paranimitta Vasavati. Gods in this realm, they enjoy sense pleasures created by others for them. So that's interesting. While in the 5th realm, the Nimanarati, they delight in their own creations. In the 6th realm, in the Paranimitta Vasavati, the gods, they enjoy sense pleasures created by others for them. Right? So these are the various forms of heavenly realms where sense pleasures are exuberant. And it's interesting to note that some of you have heard of this name Mara. In the Buddhist text, you always associate Mara with the evil one, the tempter. So Mara is said to inhabit the 6th heavenly realm. So contrary to what other religions would regard the devil, so in Buddhism, we don't really have this concept of the devil. So the tempter, the one that the being that tries to prevent Prince Siddhartha from becoming enlightened, we use the word Mara. So Mara is actually a god in the 6th realm. So from here, you would know that the 6 realms, the gods in the 6th realm, they are by no means enlightened beings. Okay, they're not enlightened. And this morning, you recited one of the 9 virtues of the Buddha called Sattva Deva Manusanam. That means we describe the Buddha as a teacher of gods and men. So you find that the Buddha would teach even the gods. So the gods themselves are not enlightened. Therefore, being reborn in the heavenly realm is not the ultimate. It's just at best a transition. Okay, the conditions are much more favorable. So many people like to make aspiration to be reborn in the heavenly realms. So these are called the sensual realms. You've got the human realm, and then you've got the 6 heavenly realms. And of course, above that, you've got 16 form realms. And all these form realms, one is only able to be reborn there through attainment of jhanas. For example, you have got the 4 jhanas. So it corresponds, the realms there correspond to each of the 4 jhanas. And each of the 4 jhanas have got, again, 4 subdivisions. So that's why ultimately you've got 16. All right. And likewise, above the form realms, you have got the formless realms. Okay. Okay, so these are the 31 planes of existence in the Buddhist cosmology, right? But as I said, I will not go into details. I will focus instead for the rest of the time, for the next 20-25 minutes, is to look into what are the 5 qualities that the Buddha emphasized in this sutta. And the 5 qualities are, number 1, faith, all right, which is saddha in Pali, sraddha in Sanskrit. And then the second one is morality, or sila in Pali, or shila in Sanskrit. And then learning, which is sutta, S-U-T-A. And then charity. Now, it's interesting, the word, the Pali word used here is chaga rather than dana, because most of us associate it with the word dana for charity. We will explain that in a short while. And finally, you have wisdom, panya, as in Pali, or prajna, as in Sanskrit. So these are the 5 qualities the Buddha says one should have. In others, one make an aspiration to be reborn as a human again, or one make an aspiration to be born in one of the celestial realms. But just making the aspiration is not good enough. One needs to have 5 key qualities. One has to develop and cultivate these 5 qualities, which are faith, morality, learning, charity, and wisdom. Okay, so the crux of this sutta today is about these 5 qualities. So let's move on to what are these 5 qualities. Now, the first quality that the Buddha talks about is faith. All right, faith. In other words, faith, which is saddha in Pali or sraddha in Sanskrit, It means that one has confidence in the Buddha's enlightenment and one takes refuge in the triple gem. Now, based on reason and understanding, as one investigates and tests the objects of one's faith. Now, faith in Buddhism is not blind faith. The Buddha makes it very clear in a discourse called the Vimamsaka Sutta, which is the discourse on inquiry, that one should not even accept what the Buddha himself had said just on faith without testing it out. So even when one hears or one reads what the Buddha said, or one reads what is written based on what the Buddha said, one should always investigate and test the object of one's faith. As in the Kalama Sutta, again, you've heard about that. For example, in the very famous Tibetan text, it's called the Tattva Samgraha, the Buddha says that one should test his teachings as one would test gold under fire. So in other words, one should really see that just as gold, when you test on the fire, you know the authenticity of the pristine quality of gold. So when you test the teachings, like we said in one of the 6 qualities of the Dhamma, when you investigate, when you come and see ehi pasiko, when you find out for yourself, then you find that your faith becomes strong. All right? So when it comes to faith, the Buddha likes to refer to faith as something that has got roots, deep roots. Because when faith has got deep roots as in R-O-O-T-S, roots, when it has got deep roots, it is not easily pulled out. Okay? So the Buddha actually uses 2 terms. One, he calls it Amulika Sada, from the word mula. Mula means roots. So Amulika Sada means that when we develop faith, but our faith has got no roots, it is easily shaken. It is easily shaken. But when our faith has got roots, what the Buddha calls Akaravati Sada, then our faith is very strong. Then whatever happens, whether it is a misfortune or someone tries to tell us that the Buddha's teaching is not true, we know from our own experience, we know from our own understanding that no, the teachings is true because we have tested it. For example, if we practice the precepts, we practice it strongly, we know the efficacy of practicing the precepts. Then we will not be easily shaken if someone says we are wasting our time in practicing the precepts. Then we know that, yes, because our faith is very strong. Okay? So our faith must be based on conviction, based on our own experience. In other parts of the teachings, the Buddha likes also say that faith is like the seed, where all wholesome states, and it inspires the mind with confidence and determination. So sometimes the word faith or saddha is also translated as confidence, trust. Okay. Now, basically from the doctrinal aspects, when we say that one has faith in the Buddha, we usually means that faith in understanding the workings of the law of karma, in other words, understanding that actions have results, and that there's ownership of our actions, and we have faith in the Buddha's enlightenment. So there are mentioned about 4 things here. So that's the first one. That's the first factor. So we make an aspiration to be reborn as a human, or make an aspiration to be reborn in a happy state after we pass away. Then we must always follow that up with faith in the Buddha, in the Dhamma, in the Sangha, and in morality. So the Buddha says faith must be based on 4 very strong elements. Faith in the Buddha, faith in the Dhamma, faith in the Sangha, and faith in ethics, morality, in Sila. So we move on to the next one now, morality. So what is morality in Buddhism? What is ethics in Buddhism? So morality is defined as the virtues or a state of mind where our actions or where our volitions are manifested, whether through speech, through bodily action, or through the mind. They are wholesome, they are skillful. It leads to the well-being and the happiness of oneself and to others. And in some of the in the Buddhist teachings, it is said that a good action or a skillful action, a wholesome action which is based on morality is such that when it's performed, it leads to the well-being and happiness, not just of oneself. It leads to the well-being and happiness of others. It leads to the well-being and happiness of oneself and others. All right. So that's the importance of what the Buddha calls morality. Now, from the Buddhist perspective, morality is best understood in terms of the 5 precepts. Okay, in terms of the 5 precepts. Now, we know that, for example, when we practice the 5 precepts, all right, this morning we recited the 5 precepts, right? So the 5 precepts are actually telling us the importance of not causing harm, not just to oneself, but to others. In fact, because we live in society, that is why we need precepts. If you look at each of the 5 precepts, for example, they are actually guidelines telling us or teaching us how to restrain ourselves, how to have self-restraint. Precepts of morality in Buddhism is not something given by some divine being, but we undertake morality based on understanding. In fact, morality in Buddhism is looked on as more as a form of a training. If you recall this morning when you recited the 5 precepts in Pali, let's take the first precept, for example. You recited Panati Pata Veramani Sikha Padang Samadhiyami. So you see there's a common word there, Sikha Padani. The second precept, you recite Adina Dana Veramani Sikha Padang Samadhiyami. So the common word in all the 5 is this word Sikha, S-I-K-K-H-A. So if you look back at this word itself, which you recited this morning, you will know that this word Sikha, actually it means training. So all of us as practitioners in the Dhamma, we are called Sikhas. We are practitioners. Okay, we are practitioners. So when we observe the 5 precepts, that means we undertake on our own with understanding, with some wisdom, that we want to refrain from causing harm to other sentient beings. Okay, so that's a very basis of understanding the 5 precepts. So 5 precepts are not commandments. We do not take it out of fear. We take it out of understanding. Okay, so that's morality. So that's Buddhist concept of morality. Now, so this is the second of the 5 factors the Buddha says that we should cultivate besides just having aspiration. Now, the third one is what is called learning, Sutta, S-U-T-A, not Sutta as in a discourse, but Sutta. So here, again, the Buddha talks about the importance of learning. Now, you understand that the Buddha's teaching, when the Buddha taught almost 3,000 years ago, it was all through in the oral tradition. So learning or hearing the teachings are very important. Okay, and here the Buddha talks about 3 levels of learning. 3 levels, yeah, 3 levels of learning. Now, the first level is when we listen to the teachings, we listen with attendance. For example, at the start of my talk, usually I would like to remind the audience to what is called the 4 reliances in the Abhisamaya Alankara, which is a very popular Tibetan text, where the first reliance is we rely on the words that we hear, not on the person. So when you listen to a Dhamma talk, always remember to listen to the words that you hear, right? Not on the person who's saying, but what is it that you hear? So that's called sutta. So when you do that frequently, you develop a level of wisdom which is called Sutta Maya Panya. Sutta Maya Panya. So wisdom which is developed, which is cultivated through hearing or through listening to the Dhamma. So listening to the Dhamma, of course, is also one of the 10 meritorious actions. 10 meritorious actions. So So listening long enough, we also cultivate wisdom. But it's a fairly low level of wisdom. Wisdom through listening or through hearing. Then, as I also mentioned in the 4 reliances, in Abhisamaya Alankara, the second one is when you not only hear the words, you not only listen to the words, you must try to understand the meaning of the words. Try to understand. Try to analyze what is the meaning of the word. Is it a provisional meaning? Is it a definitive meaning? Right? So that is very important. Right? So that's the second and the third of the 4 reliances, right? Which I always emphasize at the start of my talk. So when you analyze, when you try to critically understand what you hear, you also cultivate another form of learning, another form of wisdom, sorry. So that second level of wisdom, the higher level of wisdom is called Cinta Maya Panya. Okay? So the first level of wisdom, you develop just by listening or just by hearing. Second level of wisdom is when after listening, after hearing, you think about it, you analyze it, you have a critical analysis of what you have heard. You inquire, as the Buddha says in the Vimamsaka Sutta. You do an inquiry of what you have heard. So then you develop a second level of wisdom, which is called Cinta Maya Panya. But that's still not good enough. So the third level of wisdom is when we experience it. When we put into practice, we not only know it, we not only analyze it, but we practice it and we put it into practice and we realize the fruits of our practice. So that is why the fourth of the 4 reliances, which I always mention at the beginning of my talk, is that it's not good enough. You will only hear what has been said, or you only think about what has been taught, but you must always put it into practice. So when you put it into practice, then you realize the fruit of your practice. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha says, when one only have a lot of learning, one hears a lot, one listens a lot, one knows a lot, one may quote the scriptures, for example, if one does not put into practice what one hears or what one analyzes, then one is like a farmer who does not have any cows, but every morning he goes up to the mountains and then he sees the neighbor with 4 or 5 cows, but he has got no cows. But he knows, oh, my neighbor has got 5 cows. The other neighbor has got 6 cows. The other neighbor has got 10 cows. He knows what the neighbors have. He knows how many cows they have. But he himself has got no cows. Because of that, he's not able to get any milk from any of the cows. Right? So likewise, hearing the Dhamma is very important. But having heard the Dhamma, we have to analyze it. Having analyzed it, we have to practice it, so that when we practice it, we will experience the fruits of our practice. So that is called Bhavana Maya Anya. So that's the third level of learning. So in this discourse, the Buddha says, yes, make an aspiration to be reborn in a wholesome state after death. But make sure you've got faith, you cultivate morality, you keep your precepts, and lots of learning. Okay? Learning means that you also need to put into practice. Then the fourth quality which the Buddha talks about, which we put into practice, is what is called chaga in this text. I think many of you are familiar with the word dana, which is usually translated as generosity. But in this case, the Buddha did not use the word dana in the text, but he uses the word chaga, C-A-G-A. Okay? Now, chaga has got a slightly different connotation than just the act of giving. The act of giving is called dana, that's generosity. But chaga can have 2 nuances or two aspects to it. One aspect is more psychological, psychological in the sense that what goes on in our mind when we give? How did we give? Right? The second nuances or the second aspects of this word chaga has got more to do with that attitude or that behavior of giving up, renunciation, right? The act of giving up, saying, Wealth is what I have, but I'm prepared to give it up. So that's the act of chaga. Anyway, this is a very important concept. So the act of giving, because when we sometimes when we look at our act of giving, when we check our mind, when we check what goes on in our mind, that act of giving could actually be motivated by fear, by greed, by hatred, or even by delusion. Yeah. Sometimes when we want to give something, we give it out of anger, out of repugnance, or sometimes we give out of fear, or sometimes we give out of greed, because we may think, if I give to so and so, maybe I will get something back in return. I'll get a favor back in return. So even though that itself is still a form of giving, but it is a giving which is not motivated by selflessness. It is not giving that is motivated by an act of non-self. Is a giving that is motivated by selfish reasons. An act of giving, wanting to get something back in return. Okay? So that is, but it is still giving. We cannot deny that that is not giving. But it is, you can say, a diluted form of giving. It's not 100% skillful. So for an act of giving to be more perfect, to be more skillful, to be more wholesome, from the Buddhist perspective, is that act of giving. It is not motivated by fear, it is not motivated by greed, it is not motivated by hatred, or not motivated by delusion. This is where this word chaga comes in. It is an act of giving that is motivated by good intentions such as kindness and compassion and willingness to let go of what one possesses as part of one's striving for enlightenment. Okay? So it is not giving something, hoping that we will get something more in return. Okay? So that's the concept of giving in Buddhism. Later on, when I send you the slides, okay, I have a quote here from Ajahn Lee in what is called Letting Go, where he said, I'll just quote unquote, he said, dana is something that even crazy people can do, but chaga is a type of giving that only wise people can do, because their sense of personal possession has to end immediately in the act of giving. They see that all material things are common property. Things don't really belong to us. They don't really belong to any person. They're just there. And they are all subject to the laws of impermanence. Okay, so it is giving that is based on wisdom. Anyway, when I send you that slide, then you can see this is a beautiful quote from Ajahn Lee when he talks about generous giving. Okay, so that's the fourth one. Remember, 5 qualities. When we make aspiration, first quality is faith, second quality is morality, third quality is having extensive spiritual learning. Okay, and the fourth is on generosity. And generosity here, the Buddha makes a distinction between ordinary giving, which we associate with the word dana, with another word that he used called chaga. Okay? Now, this word chaga, this morning you recited the salutations to the triple gem. You recited the Itipiso, Bhagava, Arahang, Samma, Sambuddho, the 9 virtues of the Buddha. So that is a form of reflection. It's called the Buddha Nusati. And then you also recited the 6 qualities of the Dhamma, the Swakato, Bhagavata, Dhammo, Sanditiko, and so on, right? So the 6 virtues or 6 qualities of the Dhamma. And likewise, you recited the 9 characteristics or attributes of the Sangha, Supatipanno, Bhagavato, Savaka, Sangho. So that will be the 9 characteristics of the Sangha. So likewise, those 3 are what we call objects of meditation. So you can do a Buddha Nusati, you can do a Dhamma Nusati, you can do a Sangha Nusati. You see, the third word is Sati, Buddha Nusati. You know the word Sati means mindfulness, right? So mindfulness, meditation on the Buddha, on the Dhamma, and on the Sangha. Now there's also one more, which is called Chaga Nusati, Caga-Nusati. So you can also reflect on the goodness, on the good deeds that you have done. So maybe before you retire to bed, each evening, you could actually recite, not recite, you could mentally recall the good deeds that you have done. Whether did you do dana with selfishness and wanting something in return, or did you do dana with kindness, with generosity, with thoughts of wisdom, with the thoughts of renunciation, then you're actually doing chaga. So you can reflect on those good deeds that you have done. So it's called chaga nusati. So it's another form of meditation. So as you can see, Buddhist teachings can always be put into practice. Yeah. So practicing generosity, you not only do bodily action of actual giving with wholesome thoughts before you retire to bed, for example, or after that act, when you're sitting down quietly in your room or in your house, you can reflect on what you have done. So that's called chaga nusati. So it's a form of reflection. So that's the fifth one. So, so let me come to the last one, which is called wisdom. Okay, wisdom. Now, many people have this assumption that in Buddhism, or at least in Theravada Buddhism, we only talk about style with highly intellectual, highly analytical. We only talk about wisdom. We talk about jnana. We talk about vipassana. That we forget about faith. Talk about the emotional aspects. But from this discourse, you know that even in the Theravada teachings, there's a lot of emphasis on faith. All right. So yes, in the Mahayana teachings, for example, Asvagosha's awakening of faith in the Mahayana, that is a very important part. Right? Nagarjuna, for example, said that faith is like the sea. It is with faith that one enters the path, but it is with wisdom that one attains the path. So as you can see, while wisdom is important, wisdom is absolutely necessary, but you need to start with faith. You must have faith in the Triple Gem and faith in morality. So these are the four. They are called entry to the Dhamma. Okay? So what is wisdom from the Buddhist perspective? The Pali word is panya, and in Sanskrit it's called prajna. So sometimes you hear the word prajna. So for example, in the Mahayana, they have got a whole range of sutras or discourses called the wisdom sutras. It's called the prajna paramita sutras. All right, you've got the Hat Sutra, the Diamond Sutra, Avatamsaka Sutras, and all of them emphasizing on the importance of wisdom. So even in the Mahayana tradition, wisdom is a very important teaching. So from the Buddhist perspective, wisdom or panya is about having direct understanding of the nature of existence. In other words, having understanding of impermanence, suffering, and non-self. And when greed, hatred, and ignorance have been eliminated from one's thoughts. So wisdom is achieved when one has understood the nature of existence as impermanent, subject to change, the nature of existence as unsatisfactory or dukkha, and the nature of existence as devoid of a permanent entity which we mistakenly call a self. And likewise, when our actions, whether it is bodily, whether it is mental, or when it is physical, is devoid of elements of greed, is devoid of elements of hatred, and devoid of elements of delusion. So when these are been eradicated from the Buddhist perspective, we say one has attained wisdom. So in this case, wisdom is synonymous with the concept of nibbana. And what is wisdom? So wisdom is difficult to explain in words. So it is always described as peace. For example, nibbana. The Pali word nibbanang paramang sukhang. Nibbanang paramang sukhang, which means nibbana is the highest happiness. Nibbana is the highest bliss. Which means that when one attains nibbana, when wisdom is achieved, there is peace. So the question is, again, like all Buddhist teachings, how do we attain wisdom? Okay, how do we attain enlightenment? So again, the Buddhist path is what is called a gradual path. So we start with study of the Dhamma. All right, early on, we have this word sutta, which means hearing the teachings. So when we hear, we develop one level of wisdom. So that is a low level of wisdom. When we practice it, okay, then we are able to develop higher level of wisdom. And finally, when we realize it through bhavana, through meditation, we realize a higher level of wisdom. So from the Buddhist perspective, we always emphasize the importance of study. Okay? The Buddha, for example, taught 45 years. Why? Because of the importance of listening, for his audience to listen to what he has discovered, what he has found. If the study of Dhamma is not important, I don't think the Buddha would have spent 45 years teaching his disciples, his students, the length and breadth of India, the importance of listening to the Dhamma. Right? So it is important. In fact, there's these three Pali words, which I'm sure many of you are familiar. It's called Pariyati, Patipati, and Pativeda. So Pariyati means one must study the teachings. Patipati means having studied the teachings, one must practice it. One must put it into practice. Because when you practice it long enough, you will realize. So that's called Pativeda. So let's take the precepts, for example, which is an essential core of our practice as lay Buddhists. The first step we need is to understand why we need to keep the precepts. Because if you don't understand, you don't have a thorough understanding of why you need to keep the precepts, that practice of yours in observing the precepts may not be strong. There may not be strong roots. All right, your faith in the precepts may be what the Buddha called amulika. That means that doesn't have strong roots, amulika. So what you should do is you should try to understand, why do we need to keep the precepts? What is the rationale behind the Buddha telling us to keep the precepts? When you have a good understanding, an analytical understanding of why we need to keep the precepts, then when you practice and you observe the precepts, you will be able to do it with faith, not just ordinary faith, but with conviction, with confidence. And when you do it long enough, when you practice the precepts long enough, it begins to bear fruits. It begins to bear fruits. You begin to understand, there is benefit to practicing the precepts. That is when realization occurs, realization takes place. Okay? So this is what the Buddha meant by wisdom. So you arrive at wisdom through studying the teachings, through practicing the teachings, and through your practice of the teachings, you realize the teachings. So finally, the sutta ends where the Buddha talks again. He says, again, bhikkhus, one who possesses faith, one who possesses virtues, learning, generosity, and wisdom. He thinks on that by realizing for himself. Eventually, he realized that the ultimate is not to be reborn anywhere, right? He does not appear anywhere anymore. He cuts off rebirth. He doesn't realize the need to be reborn anymore, okay? But until we reach that stage, it is important that we have positive aspirations, and so that when we take rebirth, when our 5 qualities are strong, we will have a good rebirth, and that good rebirth allows us that opportunity, that good conditions to again come into practice with the Dhamma, practice it maybe at a higher level, and then attain to higher stages. Okay? So I think I will end here. It's already coming to 10:10. Again, my apologies for the hiccup in not being able to share with you the slides. So let me end with a prayer on the 4 sublime states. So may all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings never be separated from happiness and be without suffering always. And may all sentient beings be in a state of equanimity, free of biasness, attachment, and anger. So may all sentient beings be well and happy. May all of you be well and happy. And thank you for your patience listening to this. Sadhu, sadhu. Thank you. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to attempt to answer some of those questions.
Yes, Brother Benny, we already have a few questions. We have one question from Facebook. Can you give to someone who had taken his own life? What can you give in this situation?
Sorry, I'm trying to get your question again.
What can you give to someone who has taken his own life in that situation?
What can you give to someone who has taken his own life? That means someone who committed suicide?
Yes.
Is that the question? What
Yes.
can you give to someone who has committed
Suicide? Yeah.
Well, if he has committed suicide, how to give it to him? We can give him Dhamma teachings before he commits suicide. I suppose we can do that. But if he has taken his own life, what can we do? We can't do much, right? He has already he has really committed suicide. Well, what one could do then, I suppose, do some chanting for him if he's a Buddhist, and hopefully that his immediate next rebirth, if he's born in the spirit world, he gets the opportunity to listen to some chanting. That is only if he understands the efficacy of chanting. If he's not a Buddhist, if he have no contact with the Dhamma, you do chanting, it's not going to help. So I think what is important is to help someone before they even consider taking their lives. If we know someone has got suicidal tendencies, then one should always keep a close mind on him. One should try to console him or try to find out what is his problems and see how one could help him. Okay, but once he's taken his own life, I think it's kind of difficult. Yeah.
I see. Thank you, Brother Benny, for your answer. And
then wisdom is the attainment. So I think it is important that one start with some basic understanding. So faith, obviously, before you can even practice sila, I think that's faith. So in a way, there's a natural sequence. I'm not sure if I could use the word chronological order, but I think there's a good sequence. Just as, for example, we talk about sila, samadhi, panya, isn't it? We talk about we start with practicing morality. We start with practicing morality. Then we talk about concentration, and then wisdom. But that does not mean that we have to perfect our morality before we embark on meditation. That does not mean that we must perfect our faith in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha before we can practice our 5 precepts. It does not mean that. Yeah. Okay. So one must not have that mistaken idea that yes, it is a sequence. It's a natural sequence, but all 5 can be practiced at the same time. Okay, all 5 can be practiced at the same time. Just as the Eightfold Path, isn't it? You talk about the Eightfold Path. You talk about sila. All right. So you practice sila at the same time. You can also practice meditation. Okay.
all right. Thank you, Brother Benny. Yeah, and I'm also sure that the Buddha's teachings go hand in hand with one another, so it's easy to practice them together. Now, Brother, we have another question that you mentioned just now. The Ashura realm is a woeful realm. Sorry. However, certain learned monks point out that the Asuras reside in another part of the Devas realm. What is your point of view on this?
Yes. In fact, in some of the early teachings, for example, the Asura realm is not even mentioned. Like if you refer to a fairly early sutta called the Janu Sonin Sutta, where the Buddha preached to the Brahmin Janu Sonin. In that discourse, the Buddha mentioned only 4 realms. So Asura realm is not mentioned. So Asura realms, the Asuras actually in Buddhist mythology, the Asuras, they are actually formerly Devas, but I call it a mythology, right? They're always at war with the Devas, right? They're always at war with the Devas. When the story says that they lost the war, they lost in the war with the Devas, and as a result, they were cast down. They were thrown down from the heavenly realm into another realm. So that realm became known as the Asura realm. So yes, I think in some, maybe some commentaries, right, or the commentaries, some monks, right, like you mentioned, right, that they mentioned that the Asura realm is also considered as one of the Deva realms. But it is a realm where beings there are full of anger, full of jealousy, full of pride. They are powerful beings, right? But that's not a realm that the Buddhists aspire to be. A Buddhist would be encouraged to aspire, for example, to be reborn as a human, to be aspire as one of the 6 Deva realms, or one of the 16 form realms, or 4 formless realms, all right? But not as the Asura realms. Definitely not in the hell realms, not in the animal realms, and definitely not in the hungry ghost realms. Okay, so yes, there's some mention of the Asuras being also heavenly realms, but you have to understand the context, because the Asuras were also Devas in that sense, but they were very aggressive, full of warlike, and they are always fighting with the Devas, but because they lost the war, and then they are cast down into this Asura realm. Okay, so that's maybe you should read the Venerable Suvano's 31 planes of existence. You need to know each of these realms. Okay, I'm no expert in any of these 31 realms of existence. Don't even know much about the human realm myself. Okay.
Thank you, Brother Benny, for those insights. We have another question here. For those reborn in form or formless realm, they will need to be reborn as humans again before they can further their path towards enlightenment, just like the Devas?
Yes, Doreen. That's a question from Doreen. Yes, in fact, for those even reborn in a form or formless realm, they will need to be reborn as humans again before, or born as a Devas. In all these realms, even in the form realms, in the Brahma realms, in the Deva realms, you would have occasionally read how when the Buddha was giving teachings, that the Devas, the Brahmas, for example, Brahma Saṅkhāruppatti, would come down and implore the Buddha to teach the Dhamma. In the Mangala Sutta, you hear about the whole, groove being brightened up because the Devas came down in hordes to listen to the Buddha's teachings. So one can be reborn in any of these realms, form realms, the Deva realms, and still able to hear the Dhamma. Except if one is not yet a Sotapan, and one is reborn in the formless realm, because the formless realm, there's no body, there's no hearing. So other than the formless realms. Yes, but they all have to be reborn. So that is why in other parts of the teachings, the ideal is not to be reborn in any of those form realms or formless realms. Okay, in fact, the most appropriate position or location to be born is a human realm, because as a human realm, especially when our faculties are keen, we have the ability, much greater ability to attain enlightenment, even becoming a Buddha. All right, but one can be reborn in the Deva realm and also listen to the Dhamma, right? Just as in the Mangala Sutta, we hear about Devas coming down, listening to the Dhamma. We hear about Brahmas, right? And even different higher stages of enlightenment. But they all have to be born. Why? Because they are all still part of these 31 planes of existence, right? Remember, even the form realms, the Brahma realms, they are all within these 31 planes of existence. They are all in samsara. So the aim is ultimately to get out of samsara. So that is why if you read this discourse, unfortunately I don't have the slide with me, if you read the last paragraph, para 36 of this Saṅkhāruppatti Sutta, the Buddha talks about ultimately one is not reborn. Okay? One is not reborn. Yes.
Thank you, Brother Benny. We have a question from Facebook. When we talk about volition in karma, is that the same as will? And how do we reconcile the concept of non-self with this? For example, who does this volition belong to? Please help explain. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, the concept of volition, all right, is is any intentional actions that's performed through body, speech, and mind. Right? So if I'm not sure how you define will. If you define will in that sense, yeah, then just regard it as any action that is any volitional action that because we all have a choice. So if you consider will as choice, so then we do have a choice. We make our own decision. We have a choice whether we want to have a verbal wholesome actions or a verbal unwholesome action. So in that sense, we have a choice. So how do you reconcile the concept of non-self? Now, when we say about non-self, we are talking about in the ultimate sense. Okay? We talk about provisional truth and ultimate truth or definitive truth. In Buddhist teachings, there's always the provisional truth. So in the provisional truth, you exist, I exist. All right? But in the ultimate truth, there's no I, there is no you. So in the provisional truth or in the provisional teaching, for example, yes, there's a person that does the action. All right? If I hit the wall, all right, I can feel pain, right? Because the wall is hard. So if there's non-self, then I will not feel the pain, right? Okay? But I feel the pain because there is a self in that sense. All right? But ultimately, what is it that feels the pain? Who is it that feels the pain? Is it the hand that feels the pain? Or is it just feeling? A feeling of pain. All right? So one has to be cautious not to conclude that non-self means that we don't exist. We do exist. But we exist not in the ultimate sense. Just as an automobile or a motor car exists, but an automobile doesn't exist in the ultimate sense that when you take off the four wheels, you take off the steering wheel, you take off the tires, you take off the carburetor, you take off the bonnet, you take off the front seat, the back seat, you put them individually, arrange it individually, you ask where's the automobile, where's the car? There's no car. But when you put them all together, there is a car. So when we talk about non-self, we are talking about, in the ultimate sense, there is no enduring, no ultimate entity that one can say, this is me, this is mine. Okay? But in a conventional sense, yeah, we exist. We need food to eat. We don't eat, we get hungry. We knock against the wall, we can still feel pain. All right? So there is a self that feels pain. Okay? So likewise, when you do unwholesome actions, the Buddha realized that, or the Buddha discovered that there is there is a negative repercussion to it. There is a result to one's action. All right? There's a result to one's action. Okay.
Thank you, Brother Benny, for that spot-on analogy. Now, the last question that we have for this week's topic is a rather short question. Are the four jhanas part of the 31 planes of existence?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. They're part of the 31 planes of existence. So as I mentioned just now, in the form realms, right? So the form realms, you have got 16 layers, so to speak, 16 levels of form existence, and they're all attained through, for example, you got four jhanas, the four form jhanas, and the text explained that each of the jhanas have got 4 different levels. So 4 times 4, you got 16. So you got the 16 form jhanas. So they're all part of the 31 planes of existence. The formless realms, the 4 arupa jhanas, they are also part of the 31 planes of existence. Okay, so that is why the ultimate aim of the Buddhist practice, or the summum bonum, if you can say, the soteriological aim of Buddhism, of the Buddha's teaching, is not to be reborn in the form realms, neither to be reborn in the formless realms, but to get out of this cycle of birth and rebirth, which is what we call samsara. Okay, so within samsara is to be found these 31 planes of existence.
Thank you, Brother Benny. That's it for the questions regarding this week's Rebirth from Aspirations talk. We still have questions from last week's topic, the complexities of karma. Maybe we have a bit of extra time. Do you mind answering those questions?
Sure.
All right. A bit of overtime tonight. Hi, brother. Some believes chanting mantra helps to eliminate past negative karma. Is this true?
Chanting The question is, would chanting elevate bad karma, is it?
Yes, eliminates the past negative karma.
Oh, negative past karma. Okay. I remember some time back watching or listening to a video, Venerable Sheng Yen from Pakusan Dhamma Drum. He was also asked this question, if I remember. But again, I'm sure you can refer to what he actually said. But I remember also, based on my own understanding of the efficacy of chanting, is that when we chant, what happens is that if we seriously, resolutely put our mind focused on the chanting, our mind is actually concentrated. All right, so we actually concentrating our mind, and during that period of time, we don't have unwholesome thoughts. We only have thoughts of, it depends on what we chant. If we chant, for example, the 9 virtues of the Buddha, the 6 characteristics of the Dhamma, the 9 qualities of the Sangha, or we recite the Mangala Sutta or the Ratana Sutta, and especially if we know the meaning of those words, then our mind is focused on all those wholesome things, right? So during that period, we could be chanting for 30 minutes, we could chanting for 1 hour. Some people have marathon chanting sessions, right? Then during that 1 hour, that 45 minutes, or that 2 hours, our mind is focused on only wholesomeness. Okay? And remember, we said karma is created also through the mind. So in other words, our mental thoughts, our mental energies are all wholesome during that period when we do chanting. So that explains why in the Mahayana tradition, in the Chingtu, the Pure Land tradition, they emphasize a lot of chanting. Why? Because that chanting helps them to build that concentration. So during that period of chanting, their mind is focused only on wholesome qualities. And because wholesome qualities, you create karma. Now, we do not know for sure whether those wholesome karma would help to dilute the past karma, the past vipaka, the resultants from past negative karma when they ripen. We do not know, but the understanding is that if we are constantly generating wholesome good thoughts, wholesome good words, wholesome good actions, those actions will also will have to manifest, will have to ripen, right? You will also have vipaka. So those good actions, when we do our chanting, would in some ways may be possible to dilute the bad karma that ripens. Just like I think I mentioned in the, what sutta is that? Lonapala Sutta. The Lonapala Sutta, the Buddha says that it's like a glass of water, you fill it up with a cube of salt. When you drink it, it's very salty. But when you pour into a basin of clear water, the saltiness is not there, but even though salt is still there. So that concentrated chanting or mantras or whatever that you do would have vipaka, would have results. And those vipaka could possibly help to dilute whatever negative karma that ripens. Okay? That is if you have a very positive, wholesome chanting. That means you not wholesome, that means you do really concentrated chanting. Okay? Yes.
Yep, I see. Thank you, Brother Benny.
One more.
Yeah, we still have one more follow-up. We still have one more question, follow-up from just now. You said that yes, jhanas are part of the 31 planes of existence. And does that mean they are attainable through meditation?
Well, jhanas are, from the Buddhist perspective, are only attainable through meditation. Right? For example, to be reborn in the heavenly realm, okay, one may not need to cultivate deep jhanas, for example, yeah. But to be reborn in the form realms, you definitely need jhanas. Okay, for example, to be reborn in the heavenly realms, the 6 sensual realms. Okay, of course, one needs to cultivate the mind. You know, when we practice those 5 qualities, like faith, like learning the Dhamma, practicing the precepts, you know, cultivating wisdom, we also cultivate our mind, but maybe not to the extent of developing high states of jhanas. We could be practicing the 4 sublime states, we make it our habit. So we cultivate what is called anusayas, habitual tendencies. We cultivate the the four sublime states. So they are part and parcel of our life. So then you find that even when we pass away, before we pass away, you find that these four sublime states are with us. We pass away with loving kindness, we pass away with compassion, we pass away with joy and equanimity. Right? So if those are habitual in us, becomes habitual karma, we may not have attained to high levels of jhana. So we will be reborn in one of the sense realms. But to be reborn in the form realms, the 16 form realms, or the 4 formless realms, you need to have jhanas. You need to cultivate first jhana, second jhanas, and so on. Okay?
See, thank you for your clarification, Brother Benny. Because we are short on time, this next question will be our last question. Any questions that are not answered, we will answer next week. So brothers and sisters, please feel free to continue asking on Facebook and YouTube, as well as on Zoom. Now, this follow-up question is regarding chanting. Can chanting help to cultivate wisdom?
Well, chanting can help to cultivate wisdom, but chanting by itself is not sufficient, right? Because when you chant, you develop concentration, right? In fact, in Buddhist practices, you find this very, very, very clearly in some traditions. For example, we have chanting, which is cultivating our speech. You have meditation, which is cultivating our mind. You have bowing, which is cultivating our body. So we have a threefold practice. So that is why Buddhists bow, isn't it? Right? And sometimes if you follow the Tibetan tradition, you find that the way they do bowing, the whole body lies flat on the ground. Have you seen that? So chanting is just one aspect. We have three Dhamma doors, all right, where karma is created. Remember, 3 Dhamma doors: the mind door, the speech door, and the body door. So when you do chanting, you're actually cultivating the speech door, which is excellent, which is wonderful. All right, but you should also do cultivation of the mind door, which is through meditation. Okay. Likewise, you also do bowing. All right, bowing is not only good; it's not only as a good physical exercise, but when you bow, you are actually psychologically telling yourself that, look, there's always somebody who is better than you. And because of that, there's always something that you can learn from somebody else. So you do bowing, you always, like the Zen, at the end of their conversation, they always say, Gasho, I bow to you. That in others, I thank you. There's so much I've learned from you. So we develop what is called a beginner's mind. There's so much we can learn. The more we learn, we find that there's even more that we learn. So because of that, we bow. All right, so we do chanting, yes, very important, but chanting alone is not good enough. Because even you talk to people who practice Pure Land Buddhism, they will tell you that chanting is good, it's very important, but they also have meditation. All right, if you talk to a Pure Land practitioner, probably for the meditation, maybe they will do maybe chant, Zen meditation, Chinese Zen, all right? They do a lot of bowing. They do a lot of recitation, which is chanting. Okay, so chanting, recitation, and then bowing, and then meditation. Okay, so 3 doors, remember, 3 Dhamma doors. Chanting to the speech door, bowing to the body door, and meditation to the mind door. Okay?
Thank you, Brother Benny. And that wraps up all our questions for this week. Thank you so much for the insights as well as the wonderful Dhamma sharing. On behalf of Babs and all our viewers and participants, I would like to invite all to express our gratitude to Brother Benny. So could we please turn on our video, and our Zoom administrator will unmute us shortly. Maybe we'll give this a minute. Right? I can see almost everyone is unmuted, in fact. So we will say sadhu 3 times at the ring of the bell.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
I would like to invite Brother Benny as well as everyone to keep your cameras on as we will take a group photo to our friends on Facebook and YouTube. Sorry, we can't take the group photo with you. So next week, please remember to join us via Zoom. So we'll take a photo with our palms together. Just look at your camera and smile. All right. One more. All right. Thank you. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu to all of you. We have now come to the end of our session. Once again, I would like to thank Brother Benny, as well as all of you participants, regardless of where you may be, through Zoom, Facebook, or YouTube. And do remember to join us next week for our session here with Brother Benny. And until then, I hope you guys have a wonderful week and keep up with your practice. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Sadhu, sadhu.